Is going to
This
work.
is Governor Bobber. I like good day, doctors.
George Allen here. Good day, doctors.
Go! You're watching Dr. Politics.
They're Dr. Politics. He's the one to see. Breaking down the news with sharp analysis. From Congress halls to campaign trails, he tells the truth when all else fails. They're Dr. Politics. Dr. Politics. Exposing the spin, the lies and tricks. Dr. Politics. Dr. Politics. He calls it straight, no politics as usual. Love from backroom deals to primetime fights. He sheds some light and sets things right. Debates, elections, policy. He cuts through all the DC sleaze. Oh, Dr. Politics, he's got the facts. Dr. Politics, no holding back. Dr. Politics, go away. Dr. Politics, he's got the facts. Dr. Politics, no holding back. Dr. Politics.
All right. Well, welcome to Dr. Politics. I'm David Shepard. I'm the substitute host tonight of the show. Dwight and Don are otherwise indisposed. Don's on a trip, and I think Dwight's in Florida. So it's just me. And my guest is longtime friend and delegate from Newport News, Virginia, Phil Hamilton. And Phil, thank you for coming on and joining me tonight.
Well, thank you, David. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, it's interesting. Dwight and Don are from Maryland, and most of our viewers are from Maryland. So now we've got a night with two Virginians. So I guess we're taking over the program. But I also want to appreciate you. You know, you've been one of my great readers of my Substack, and I always get a comment from you, and that's great. And I had to laugh. I think it was last week. I finished a column. It was 4 a.m. I put it up, and you read it quick. And then by 5 or so, or 4:30, I got a comment saying how you liked it. And then I said, "Well, you're up late," and you're like, "I'm just getting up in the morning." And so we have very different schedules because I was up all night, in part working on that. And it reminded me. Remember the old? We're old enough to remember the old Dunkin' Donuts commercial where the guy's always making donuts. And so the night him got up to go, and he's groggy. I gotta go make the donuts. And he's walking out the door, and the morning him, they collide because they're making donuts all night. So that what it was like. You and I was just about to go to bed, but I wanted to ask you just a little about you, though. You served in the House of Delegates, but I was trying to think, and I'd forgotten the years you were there. I remember seeing you down there, but I forgot the years you were in the House of Delegates.
Yeah, in November of 1988, I won a special election.
Okay.
The previous delegate had gotten elected in 87, passed away 5 months later. Then I won the special election. So my first session was the 1989 session.
Okay.
And then I served until 2009 when I lost that election. So it was 21 years. I served for 21 years.
Well, those are good times. I came to, and I hope the people watching don't mind this trip down memory lane. For me, I interned for Dave Albo, and that would have been the early 90s. And so I came down for Dave Albo, who was from Springfield, and I'd met him at a political event, and I asked to intern. And for me, I grew up right outside D.C., but I didn't have Potomac fever. I had more the James River fever. In other words, I was kind of more interested in state politics. And I don't know, people thought that was kind of odd. There's so many think tanks because I had to do an internship. I could have interned in Washington, but I went 90 miles down to Richmond and interned for Albo. And he would have me come down once every Monday to do General Assembly stuff, and then back in his district, I would do things. So he would have me doing things in the district. And I first met you, but you would remember this was years later. You and Albo were together, and I remember Albo said, "Oh, this is Dave Shepard," and it was in the Capitol building, and I was. This was after. This would have been in the early 2000s, and I was there. I don't know why I was in Richmond, but I remember seeing Albo, and he introduced me to you, and I guess I looked sort of disheveled or something because Albo said it looked like I had just woken up on a park bench there in Capitol Square. But
Well, that would be Albo, because Albo had
yeah,
probably was just coming in.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dave was quite a guy. They say one of the still is, but they say one of the strengths he had as a politician was he was like the guy next door kind of thing. And Albo was very likable, and that may have helped him politically.
Oh, he was extremely likable, and he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So he you know, my experience was you had to earn the respect of others in the General Assembly, and you did that by doing your homework, knowing what you were talking about, and being able to work across lines. And Dave was excellent at that, and he was an excellent chairman of the Courts Committee when he ascended to that position. But no, Dave was a very good and a strong legislator. I know he represented the people of Springfield well, and he was an ardent advocate for Northern Virginia.
Yeah, the unique thing about Albo is he made his mark in traffic law because he basically wrote it. And Dave Albo, probably more than anything else, shaped Virginia's traffic laws. Now he's since left, and there are a good bit of differences. But Albo would have been, I mean, an expert at it. And I just tell the story. So a few years ago, I got a ticket because in Virginia, it's now we're hands free, like Maryland and all these other states.
Right.
Well, I was driving down 66. I picked up my phone. Well, I was going through a divorce, and I got another text message. I'm, what the hell now? So I grabbed my phone, and all of a sudden there's a cop right there. Well, for that charge, as you know, you have to still show up to court. And they had a few other little charges. They dropped the speeding charge against me. But the reason for the story is that I emailed Albo to get his advice. And I thought that was so great that I'd have the power to email the guy that basically wrote Virginia traffic law. So I thought that was kind of cool.
And I bet he responded to you.
Yes, Dave was very good at responding.
He was.
Yeah, that was one of his strengths, I think. But what about, for those unfamiliar with Newport News, your district, it was drawn, I imagine when you came in, the Democrats were still in control of the General Assembly.
Yes.
So the district wouldn't be necessarily favorable to Republicans, but was Newport News ever sort of conservative or Republican?
Not in my lifetime. But when I was elected, it was starting. The area that I ended up representing was starting to become frustrated with local politics. And Everett Hogg, the person that I succeeded, actually was the first Republican to be elected to a state office from Newport News. As best we could officially document was back to like 1920, but we suspect it may have even gone back as far as Reconstruction. Yeah. And so I was the only Republican elected in the Newport News delegation, and really at that time, the only Republican elected in the Peninsula delegation. So that was somewhat of an anomaly.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And it's probably changed because I was coming up in politics where you had the rise of the Republican Party, which is captured perfectly in Frank Atkinson's book, Dynamic Dominion, where you had Virginia then started becoming a Republican state. But now I think we've gotten to the point, and I think with Youngkin, he helped kind of slow that down. But then we started having a leftward drift through god-awful Ralph Northam. And then we had Youngkin kind of put a little break on it, and we retook the House delegates at least for 2 years. So Virginia, I think now has become still pretty swing. I think it's purplish, but I don't think it's a blue state. But
No,
now,
I would agree with that. And I think it's based on the individual that's running.
yeah,
I will tell you that here on the peninsula, we've got Chad Green, who represents a portion of Newport News, but he doesn't live in Newport News. We've got Danny Diggs, who's a state senator that also represents a small portion of Newport News, but he doesn't live in Newport News either. So of the representatives in Richmond that live in Newport News, they are Democrat. But we do have some Republican representation down here on the peninsula.
one last, and then we'll go on to topics of the day. I don't want to nerd out on Virginia politics, but one last question for you. The very name Newport News. Here's what I heard: that during the Jamestown settlement in the early days, it was named after Christopher Newport, I assume. But when people wanted to find out what's going on back home, they would go to Newport and they'd say, "What's the news?" So it became known as Newport News. Is there any truth to that at all?
That's partially correct. Christopher Newport was the one that was kind of the supply chain between England and Jamestown. And so when he came back, the settlers from Jamestown actually went to the point of Hampton Roads, which is the end of Newport News. That's where they'd meet up with Christopher Newport, not only to get some supplies, but also to get the news. So yes, Newport News. That was exactly tied to Christopher Newport, the Jamestown settlement, and getting information back and forth from the settlement to England and from England back to the settlement.
Okay. Yeah, they didn't have cell phones back then, so
No,
we
they
couldn't
didn't.
call back England. So, well, I guess to get back sort of the news of the day, and I just posted the Substack column. I don't know if you caught Joe Biden's interviews with either the BBC or The View. I don't know if you heard it of what he said.
Yeah, and I would suggest that he do a national interview every single day.
Yeah,
because the more he talks, the better I think it is from a political standpoint for Republicans, because I think Democrats are trying to get out from under the Biden umbrella, and he just won't pull the umbrella down and put it away. But he was not impressive.
No, I agree. It's almost sad, I think, sort of to watch him. But the delusion, I think he kind of believes it. I don't think, at first I thought, well, he's just a liar, he's a politician, but I'm starting to think he might believe it. For example, even his notion that he dropped out. Well, he didn't really drop out. They forced him out. My guess is they could cut the campaign money from him. They could say, you're not getting any money if you don't get out. And secondly, leaking stories against him about his mental incompetency, which they could leak out. So they forced him out in effect. Is my take.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I would say that he's still delusional on, although I don't think he mentioned this on The View, maybe this was on the BBC interview, is the border. He still talked about the bipartisan deal of 2024 if it had passed, as if that would have solved the problem. And he ignores the fact that he said there was nothing he could do on his own and he needed this bill. Well, Trump clearly stopped it without it. So he seems delusional on that front as well. I'm amazed we survived him. I think he was probably the worst in my lifetime. I don't know about you. I always thought Carter was the worst, but I don't think Carter was malicious. I don't think Carter tried.
Yeah, and I would say that of the presidents that in my lifetime that I actually can remember, Biden clearly was the worst.
Yeah.
That bipartisan bill would have allowed 5,000 people a day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So clearly the border would have still been open for the first 5,000 to show up. So that's the delusional nature of that. And again, if you remember, it was about May or June of 2024 when he did reenact some of those executive orders, and it caused the border crush to diminish pretty significantly. And that was just done prior to the election. That was just an election ploy. They had gone right back had Harris been elected. and then you just still had the same issue. But it clearly was something that he could have done with executive orders, and he chose not to. And he is. I think he still thinks that he had the greatest presidency in American history.
Yeah, yeah, it's just sort of a massive delusion. I don't know if Jill talks him into that or what, but yeah, no, he was bad. Do you have any? Yes, you served in the House of Delegates, and switching topics, but I think of chief executives. Are there any governors that you really liked or thought was good? I mean, as an outsider, I think of, I mean, Allen I thought was good. I like Youngkin. I think Gilmore was good. And I'll say this, and you served, I guess, when he was there. I didn't know what you thought about Doug Wilder. I thought for a Democrat, Wilder was pretty good.
I thought, I mean, I agree with your assessment of the Republican governors that you mentioned. I think Doug Wilder was probably the biggest surprise.
Yeah.
He ended up being much more conservative than what people thought he would be. Part of that was because of the recession that he had to deal with. He didn't have the money. The state didn't have the money to spend. So if he had some wild ideas for spending, the budget restricted him there. But I thought Doug Wilder was a good governor for Virginia at the time that he served. And I think Virginia's been blessed. By the time I was in the legislature, 1 year under Belials, and then Wilder, then George Allen, Gilmore, Mark Warner, Kane. I mean, I think we've been blessed with good governors. That doesn't mean I always agreed with all of them on everything, but I always had the opportunity to talk with them, and you know, sometimes that's the art of the deal, being able to communicate. I mean, that's so critical in so much of what goes on in life, the ability to communicate with others. And I felt like in Virginia, that was one of our strengths, is that, yes, we had our partisan differences, but we never got to the point where we stopped talking about solutions. And I mean, I can remember the whole car tax situation that the Republicans wanted the no car tax, or the car tax reduction, and the Democrats wanted school construction funds. And we weren't going to get both until we did. And we did, because we kept the conversation going. We were able to work it out. The no car tax became a phase in, and then we didn't put in as much money as originally wanted for the school construction fund. Well, but you put in $150 million, which was a good start. And that was an example of how my time in the General Assembly worked. We had our differences, we debated our differences, and when push came to shove, we came together to resolve our differences to create win-win situations. And I think that was a credit to the leaders of both political parties at the time.
Yeah, I agree. And it was, I think the only one that you can really say, and I think you'd agree with me, was an absolute disaster would have been Ralph Northam. Northam was the worst, but you didn't have to deal with him so much in the legislature. You weren't in the legislature, but yeah, Northam, I think, was the worst.
Yeah, he had just gotten elected as a state senator, and one of the biggest shocks was that A, he won the lieutenant governor's race, and that B, then he ran and won the governor's race, because in the limited time that he was in the state senate when I was there, he never gave the appearance that he was someone that would even have a desire to ascend to either one of those positions.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then my understanding is Northam at one point was a Republican before he got into elective office, from what I've heard. That's what he said. So he had a drift. Well, maybe you know something different. I don't know. That's what I'd heard.
Well, he was from the Eastern Shore.
Yeah.
And then when he decided to run for the state senate, then he had to take a portion of that district was Norfolk and some of those areas. So he probably did change his political leanings in order to win the political office that he wanted to have.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have surprised me. I had not heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me, because the Eastern Shore, I think, is pretty conservative.
I think it was also released that he voted for George W. in 2000 and maybe 2004, but I don't know. So he had a drift to the left that kept going and going and going, and he was bad. So I thought he was the worst. McAuliffe was bad too. The difference is, this is just my opinion, but I think for McAuliffe, we had a Republican legislature. They could check him. The scary
Right.
thing with Northam is in his second, third, and fourth year, third and fourth, he had a Democrat legislature, and they were so woke that they put pressure on him to move him to the left, and he had no strength to say no. So you had at least one socialist, Democratic socialist, in the Virginia legislature. So that was a wild time, those few years in with Northam. For me, that was the wildest time in Virginia politics.
Uh-huh.
The other thing I would say is that in your days, we still had what was known as sort of the Virginia way, where you had Democrats and Republicans working together. But I think Richmond today is every bit as partisan as DC.
Yeah, it was starting to turn. It was becoming more political,
Yeah.
like the last couple of years that I was there. But I will tell you, it was clearly a bipartisan legislature when I was there. If there were battles, I always thought there were bigger battles between the House and the Senate, regardless of which party was in power, than there ever was between the House Democrats and the House Republicans.
Yeah.
We did have our differences, but we resolved them.
Yeah.
But the biggest conflicts always seemed to be the House and the Senate.
Okay.
And it made no difference who was in power.
Okay. Those were the nicer times, I think, with the so-called Virginia way. And I remember, and this would have been the first speaker that you served under, would have been A.L. Philpott, I assume, from Martinsville. Would it have been Philpott that you first served with?
Yes.
And Philpott, oh, go ahead.
Oh,
As
Philpott is conservative as they come.
Yes. And my understanding is that the story I heard, I talked to Vance Wilkins once, and I was asking Wilkins because I thought it was surprising. I said, and this is a question I never understood until Wilkins kind of explained it to me. I kept thinking, how can Philpott, who's generally conservative, how did he end up campaigning for Arlington County or Alexandria liberals? And Wilkins understood perfectly. He said, look, he was trying to keep a majority, and he was willing to back the liberal if he could stay as speaker. And so that was an interesting way of looking at it. And I think that was probably the natural way to think about it. But for me, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're a conservative. Why are you helping out other members of your party that are so far left? But I think that was because he wanted to be speaker and he had to hold the caucus together.
Right. But when you looked at some of his committee appointments,
Yeah.
Back then we had a Labor and Commerce Committee and a Corporations, Insurance, and Banking Committee that later merged after I was on the Labor and Commerce Committee. That was the one committee at the time that was 11 Democrats and 9 Republicans. And he had a couple of conservative Democrats on there.
Yeah.
So a lot of the legislation that people would have thought, oh, a Democratic majority would just automatically pass it. He had stacked that committee. So things like right to work law.
Yes.
That was his conservatism. He was going to protect that. And he made that committee 11-9, whereas the Appropriations Committee was 17-3.
Okay.
And
Wow.
other committees, that was the one that was the closest to being equal. And even though the majority, when I got elected, I was the 35th Republican.
Okay.
And so we were a 2-1 minority. But the Labor and Commerce Committee was 11-9 Democrat to Republican.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. And speaking of right to work, that has always been sort of, they talk about the third rail of, well, they don't mention that, but it's like, to me, it's like the third rail of Virginia politics would be right to work, because even Democrats are frightened of that issue because Virginia, business-wise, still very pro-business. And two examples of, and maybe that's changing, but still right to work's a salient issue. I'll give you two examples. Remember when Terry McAuliffe ran 4 years ago, he had to bow to labor and he said, I will sign a bill to get rid of right to work. But he would then tell everybody, this is very cynical. He'd say, well, don't worry, it's not going to pass. So
Right.
he tried to play it both ways that way. Just a weird, I never heard a politician play it that way. But I hear Abigail Spanberger, her twist on the right to work is she tells labor, I will support a partial repeal of right to work.
Right.
So that's the latest sort of twist on that. And the converse, the opposite of that, it's similar in terms of abortion, where remember Marshall Coleman, when he ran, he basically took kind of the McAuliffe position. Yeah, I'm pro-life and all, but the legislature's not going to pass it. So
Right.
It's interesting that now, but right to work still stays an issue, but it's interesting how that pattern is.
Well, and I have not read, I'd heard that Spanberger had come out with that position.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you partially repeal right to work.
Yeah.
You
yeah.
either have the right to work or you don't have the right to work.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I
mean,
haven't read the story. I don't know how she'll do it, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
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 And
I do think that is still, it may not be as sacred today as it was back when I served in the legislature. But I think when push comes to shove, because, you know, we pass legislation that allows unions to exist. We don't restrict unions.
Yeah.
And if people want to unionize, there's a process that they can do that or
Yeah.
attempt to do that. And so I think that was somewhat of the compromise that was made back when I was in the legislature, that the opportunity was there and we leave it up to the workers. And if the workers vote that they want to unionize, then they can unionize. You know, and now they've got the collective bargaining for public employees. That was always a big issue when I was there. And obviously it was unsuccessful, but I know that recently, you know, that has passed. For me, public service, and those public service workers, if they want to unionize or organize, but they should never have the right to strike.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, public service, especially, yeah. Because the
I
thing
mean,
is,
your
you can
police
strike
and your
it.
fire, and I don't believe in that aspect of it. But if it's about just unionizing and this, that, and the other, and the collective bargaining, you know, I don't think anybody should ever be forced to pay union dues.
Yeah.
And I understand the other argument. Well, yeah, but it's the union that's getting all the benefits. Well, that's the way it works. But I don't believe you should force people in a right to work state that they have to pay union dues, just because 51% of the workers that they work with wanted to organize.
Yeah.
But that's just my personal perspective, and
No,
I'm not in that arena anymore. So my perspective doesn't mean much to anybody.
No, I agree. Well, what made you get involved in politics? What made you decide to run?
Well, it was interesting. My mother ran for the House of Delegates in 1957.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know.
She was one of two women in Virginia that ran as a woman, and Pete Geeson's mother was the other one up in the Shenandoah Valley. Well, Shenandoah Valley is a little more receptive to the Republican philosophy.
Yes.
My mother obviously didn't win, but my dad also was a chairman of the Newport News Republican Committee from 1960 to 64. So I kind of grew up in a household where politics was at least discussed and talked about. And when I was a teacher, one of the things I taught was, they called it social studies, but it was basically history. And I enjoyed that and taught civics and that kind of thing. So I stayed informed on government. And when Ted Morrison decided to retire prior to 1987, I said, well, I live in the district and I'm a registered voter in that district. I think I'll run for it. And threw my hat in the ring and came in fourth out of a four-way nominating convention. But I was the only candidate that got more votes until I had to drop out. The others kept losing votes. I gained votes, but I still was low man on the totem pole. And but I ended up becoming the campaign manager for Everett Hogg, who won the seat, to become the first Republican in, at least at that time that we could document, close to 70 years.
Wow.
And then unfortunately he passed away 5 months later, and I won the special election, and then had the privilege and honor of serving for 21 years. And it truly was a great honor to be able to serve the public in for the years that I did.
Absolutely. And you think about it, the House of Delegates goes back to the House of Burgesses. So the oldest legislature in the world is the Virginia General Assembly.
Right. Well, and one of the highlights was for me was the 400th anniversary of Jamestown in 2007, when the Queen came over and we had the special session of the legislature, the joint session there where she spoke to us, and that was just a highlight, a real highlight as well.
Yeah, I get. Who was governor at the time? Was it Kane?
Yes, in 2007.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's that's interesting. I remember that. So that was quite an event for us. And we got another birthday coming up, right? The 250th anniversary of the country.
Yeah.
So
in
that's good.
2026.
Yeah. Wow. I remember, it shows how old I am, but I remember the bicentennial. I was a little kid, but I remember it. So yeah, time flies. But are you? Do you have? Oh, by the way, I did want to ask you. It reminded me because of your parents being involved in politics. John Reed, our candidate for lieutenant governor, I heard the other day that it was his father, John Reed, in the House of Delegates, and I'm kind of remembering that.
Yeah, Jack Reed.
Yeah, Jack Reed. It's
that was his dad, and he was a great guy. And the thing that Jack and I shared together, we were both public school administrators.
Okay, all right.
And we've both served on the House Education Committee, and let's just say that a lot of legislation came before that committee that never saw the light of day after its committee hearing.
Okay.
Because so many people wanted to come in and put more and more mandates and this, that, and the other, and things didn't have to be mandated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the school divisions had a lot of flexibility to implement a lot of the stuff that they were bringing forward, but they thought everybody in Virginia should be doing it their way. And Jack, who was a great guy, he and I took pleasure in deciding who was going to make the motion to kill the bill and who was going to second it.
Okay, good.
But that's when I first met John, back when his dad was in the legislature.
Okay, yeah, because it's interesting. I read that the other day, and I'm thinking Jack Reed. I think I remember him as a delegate.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, but okay, so yeah, so it's interesting, that family connection. So that's good. I must say I always enjoyed going down to Richmond, but since they had the riots and the tearing down the statues, I have not been back to Richmond. So I am sorry what happened sort of to the city, but it was coming back for a while. All our lives, Richmond continued to lose population to Charlotte and other places.
Right.
But there was a time when Richmond started coming back, and I remember the census, they got back over 200,000. But now with the problems that they've had with that Mayor Stoney and the others, I just it's just sad what happened to really a great city, I thought.
Oh yeah, I mean I enjoyed the time that I was there, serving in the legislature. It was always nice, for that 2-month break in your regular normal schedule to go to Richmond. And while it had its frustrations and this, that, and the other, it was still, I thought, a wonderful time in Virginia politics. But I also thought it was a good time, because I do think Richmond was starting to make some of the redevelopment things that were going on. I think they had potential, and it is unfortunate. You'd like for your capital city to be that shining star on the hillside. It's the Capitol building and all the history that's affiliated with that. It's unfortunate, and wish Richmond the best. And turning itself around and becoming a showcase for the Commonwealth.
I know this is a lot of people don't really care about these things so much, but just the architecture. I remember the days before they did the excavation or the tunnel under the Capitol and all that.
Right.
I never liked that. It just doesn't seem to fit. And I like the olden days with the.
Well, I can tell you that tunnel was always a point of controversy.
Yeah. Okay.
And 1 year we had a legislator that bought everybody an umbrella.
Okay.
Because the House was not, that tended to be more of a Senate initiative. And of course, we made a lot of fun of that. But yeah, we passed out umbrellas. Okay. And we were not in favor of the tunnel. And I was disappointed to learn that they had decided to, approve that and some of the renovations and things that they were doing with the General Assembly building. But, it is what it is.
Well, the history of Capitol Square is so great, and that statue of Washington pointing south, Jefferson Davis was sworn in 1861, right under that statue.
Uh-huh.
And I included that in my book, Mentions of the Statue. And there's an old story of when Churchill came. He was a member of Parliament, I guess, and he came to stay with the Byrds in the 20s. And the story is that one day, Churchill took a walk around Capitol Square, and Churchill walked up to the statue of Washington, and he just admired it for a bit. And then this lady, this Richmonder, came up next to him, and she said, Mr. Churchill, I hear you're involved in politics. And at the time in America, they wanted to get rid. They had the temperance movement to stop people from drinking.
Uh-huh.
And Churchill was a big drinker. And
yeah.
she said to Churchill, would you put in a good word for the temperance movement? And Churchill just nicely said to her, Madam, on that one, we'll have to agree to disagree. So there's just all kinds of these stories you hear.
Yeah, there are.
It's really nice. And I always love my time in Richmond. But I'm sad what they did to the statues and the great history there. Well, if you want, we'll spend just a little bit more time and then we'll be done. But talk about more national issues because I know we're boring people maybe with all our Virginia political talk. So what do you think of Trump's 100 days so far? This is the first time I've talked to you since we got rid of Biden, then we got Trump.
Well, I'll tell you what I like most of all.
Yeah.
He campaigned on the things that he has done. Yeah. People act shocked that he's done this or he's done that. And I'm thinking, why are you shocked? He talked about tariffs. He talked about everything that he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
He's at least initiated the process on that. So from that standpoint, I'm always going to be respectful of any elected official that actually does what they said they were going to do. Mm-hmm. He told people what he wanted to do. They voted him into office and he's followed through. Mm-hmm. Now, anybody that thought it was going to happen at 12:01 p.m. on January 20th doesn't understand how things work. But I know that I bought gasoline today, $2.73 a gallon.
That's beautiful.
And, so that's a significant decrease from what it was the day he got elected. And the price of eggs has come way down. I think, the trade deal that was announced with the United Kingdom and some of the other negotiations and things that are going on, I think are ultimately going to be very positive. I think that within 12 to 18 months, I think a lot of things are really going to turn around. Certainly hope so. And hopefully if we get the tax cuts extended and some of the other things, as someone on Social Security, I certainly don't have any qualms with the no tax on Social Security. And I think, what he did with Doge, he said that that's what he was going to do. Yeah. And they've gone in and they've found things that how do you spend money and not have a receipt for it?
Yeah.
That means you might have appropriated the money for a very well-intentioned cause. Yeah. And you see a $400 million check written, but you don't know what it's for. Yeah. That just raises suspicions. Yeah. And maybe it went to the well-intentioned cause, but maybe it didn't. And I think, government efficiency will save us billions and billions and billions of dollars just in upgrading computer systems.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happening in the with the FAA, and they're using technology that you wouldn't put in a fifth grade classroom today.
Yeah.
But yet some of that technology is monitoring our airways, and the airplanes and the travel. It's nuts. So we've got to make that investment. And I thought the infrastructure bill, the great infrastructure bill that was passed under Biden, would have addressed some of those things. But what we built 8 charging stations for $8 billion for all the electric cars that were being mandated. So all in all, the thing I'm most pleased with is that this president is doing what he told the people he was going to do before they voted for him. And I don't have any qualms with that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things that, a lot of the criticisms against him are things that he never promised to do. It's like, not continuing to fund Ukraine. Well, he didn't campaign on it. Just certain things that he's doing, like you said, what he promised to do, and that's what he's focused on. I think hopefully everything will work out with the trade, though. It's a little nervous till we get those deals done. I know it's also certain uncertainty in the market, and I hate uncertainty. But I think good there. I did think it's kind of funny, though, his trolling of Canada and Justin Trudeau. I don't know what it is about Justin Trudeau, but he didn't like him.
Is this the same Justin Trudeau that did blackface back when he was younger?
Yeah,
that same one. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Ralph Northam situation north of the border. But you remember that? You remember, speaking of that, the blackface situation, you had Northam, but you also had the Attorney General. They had a picture of him in blackface.
Mark Herring, yep.
And the joke was that Democrats, don't they read the instructions on shoe polish? Do not apply to face.
Yeah.
But that Justin Trudeau, and so we'll see. I mean, it's the reality about that is I don't think we'd want them as a 51st state, though. He keeps talking about Canada, the first. It's like I say it's like Virginia annexing Montgomery County, Maryland. It just
Right.
It's really stupid, but
no,
otherwise,
thank you.
Yeah, but otherwise, so he's done great, and I think things are going good, and we got an American Pope now, so things really
that was quite a surprise. As a Roman Catholic, I would have never imagined in my lifetime that an American would have been selected as a pope. Only because I think there's, when in a universal church like that, you just don't think that they're going to turn to America to elect a pope. But this fella, from what I've seen, what I've read, and what I've heard about him, he seems to be an outstanding individual, and hopefully he will be the leader that I think the church needs, and I think in a lot of respects the world needs. We just need someone that brings a lot of the biblical virtues into daily life, and is a spokesperson for those virtues and for those that believe in those virtues.
I agree with you 100%. And I do think, and I hope that he'll be more of a moderate than Francis. I don't know yet his politics there, but a little levity. They said, that now that we have a Pope from Chicago, perhaps Rome now will finally get some good pizza. So
deep dish.
Deep dish. That's right. That's always very good. And I guess before we part, I know you have a lot of great stories in Richmond. Is there something, you've told me a few, but are there any stories of your time in the House of Delegates that, in sort of a legacy? I remember you once told me that, was it a commission or something the governor appointed you to deal with the issue of the death penalty? I think you had mentioned a story about that.
Well, the governor didn't appoint me to a commission on that, but I kind of created my own one-person commission.
Okay.
Back in 1990, we had an execution in Richmond, and of course the press always has a representative there as a witness, and the description of the impact of that electricity on that individual, it seemed more torturous. The end result is always going to be the end result, but I just became an advocate for allowing lethal injection as an alternate method, and it was a 4-year experience. And I once had a reporter ask me, "What gives you the right to try to change the way Virginia chooses to execute individuals?" And I said, "Well, I'm a legislator. Legislators make laws, and laws are what determine how to do that." He said, "But have you ever seen an execution?" And I said, "No." And I almost took that as a challenge. And so I asked to be a witness to an execution, which at the time was electrocution, and actually had been selected for the Joe Giarratano execution that Governor Wilder commuted. And that didn't slow me down as far as my work on the legislation. But 6-7 months later, I got a call from the Department of Corrections asking if I still wanted to be an execution, because they were doing one in July the following year. And I said, "Well, yeah." So I did, and I went and saw that execution. It was the first one done at Jarrett. It was clinically perfect. But I was still convinced that there ought to at least be an alternate way to do it. And people said, "Oh, you think it's more humane?" I said, "No, there's no humane way to take another person's life." I said, "But we introduced the electric chair in 1908 because it was a more modern method to hanging." And I said, "Lethal injection is a more modern method to carry out a mandate that the people of Virginia have wanted in their criminal justice system." And so I never said it was humane, but my perspective. But it took 4 years, and eventually it did pass. And I felt like after 4 years that I had a duty to also go be a witness for the first lethal injection. And I was a witness to that, and I think it was the right move in some respects. Maybe it led to the anti-death penalty movement. I don't know, because people said, "Oh, it's going to be so easy. No one's going to be shocked by the torturous nature of electrocution." But yeah, that was a that whole 4-year experience there. I would say might have been the most significant piece of legislation that I passed on an issue that was that high profile. First time I put it in and it went to Courts of Justice Committee, I got 1 vote in favor and 19 against. The 1 vote in favor was George Allen.
Oh, okay.
4 years later, he signed the bill enacting it into law.
Oh, wow.
When he was governor.
All right, good. Yeah,
Interesting.
Well, as a boy growing up in Northern Virginia, I had heard of the town of Jarrett because that's where the prison is, and that's where you would have executions. So I did know of the town. So I did know of that. Well, that sounds good. And usually we end the show on any sort of final thoughts that we might have. And for me, I'd say I'm looking forward to the weekend. I got a birthday coming up. I'm not looking forward to that, but I still feel good and healthy. And I will be next month in Madison, Virginia, pushing my book, speaking to a Republican group there. And so that's a lot of fun. So the books are coming well. And I'm doing my writing with the Substack. And I think this was a great week for me. I think I had 3 new columns up this week. Which
you did.
A goal. Yeah, I try to keep it up that high as I continue to build more subscribers. But Phil, anything coming up for you? You're looking forward to?
Hey, I look forward to the next morning that I wake up. That's
Well,
it. I
yeah.
have low expectations. But David, I wish you a happy birthday, and to all the mothers that might be listening, happy Mother's Day, being Mother's Day weekend. You all are the backbone of America.
Absolutely. And I'm blessed still to have my mother, so we'll celebrate, and she'll celebrate with her 5 grandkids and daughter and son. Well, all right. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for being on, and I still hope to come down to see you down there in Newport News soon. So,
David, look forward to seeing you if you get this way.
all right. Well, thank you a lot. Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, David. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right.